The rain fell softly over the city, a glittering veil of silver against the night lights. Inside the towering glass office of Armand Group, the air smelled of power and old money. People lowered their voices when Jareth Armand entered the room, the young CEO with eyes like winter and a heart wrapped in frost. But tonight even Jareth looked uneasy. His grandmother, Evelina Armand, the iron matriarch of their dynasty, sat across from him in her wheelchair, her silver hair pinned neatly, her gaze sharp as ever. "You've built empires," she said, her voice trembling with age and wisdom, "but you've built them alone." "Grandmother," Jareth sighed, loosening his tie. "I'm not—" "You are what I made you," she interrupted, "but I didn't raise a man to die surrounded by papers and strangers." Her hand shook as she reached for a small velvet box beside her. "This family needs an heir. It needs love again." Jareth's expression softened for the briefest second. "You know what love cost my father," he said quietly. "I'm not repeating his mistakes." Evelina smiled faintly. "Then maybe love will repeat you." Outside that very night, a girl named Mira Solon stood at the gates of the Armand estate, drenched, shivering, clutching her resume and a small umbrella that had given up halfway through the storm. She wasn't supposed to be there. A janitor's daughter with no connections, no luxury, just hope. She'd applied for a simple caretaker's job. Assist an elderly woman with her garden and morning routine. Nothing special, nothing like fate. The gatekeeper looked over her suspiciously. "You're here for Mrs. Armand?" Mira nodded, rain dripping from her hair. "Yes, sir. She said she wanted someone who still remembers the smell of soil." He frowned. "That's a strange thing to say." But hours later, when Evelina Armand met her, she laughed like she hadn't in years. "You've got kind eyes and gentle hands. Stay."
Days passed. Mira brought life back to the mansion's forgotten gardens. She brewed tea with mint and chamomile, told Evelina stories of her late mother, and never asked about the wealth surrounding her. The two women became unlikely companions, one rich in history, the other in heart. Until one morning, Jareth came home early. He found Mira kneeling in the garden, dirt on her hands, humming softly as sunlight broke through the clouds. For a moment, the sight stopped him. Something about her quiet grace felt disarming. "Who are you?" he asked curtly. She stood quickly, startled. "I'm Mira, sir. I work for your grandmother." Jareth's tone sharpened. "You're not staff I approved." "Your grandmother hired me," she said, meeting his gaze despite her nerves. "She said, I make the roses listen." That reply, so simple, so earnest, caught him off guard. Evelina appeared behind him, smiling knowingly. "She's staying," she said, voice firm. "And you, Jareth, will spend time with her. You could learn something from people who still see beauty." Jareth scoffed, but didn't argue. His grandmother's word was law. That evening, as the city lights glimmered below the mansion, Mira heard a soft piano melody from the library. She peeked in to find Jareth playing, eyes closed, hands steady. It was beautiful, melancholy, the kind of sound that came from a man who'd forgotten how to feel. When he noticed her, he stopped abruptly. "I didn't know you played," she said softly. He turned toward her, face unreadable. "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not, but I know loneliness when I hear it." Jareth's gaze flickered, something fragile beneath the cold exterior. But before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Another call from the board, another meeting, another escape. He left without a word. Mira looked after him, her heart heavy for reasons she couldn't name. Later that night, Evelina watched from her balcony, the city reflected in her weary eyes. "It's starting," she murmured to herself. "The past always finds a way back." Because what neither Jareth nor Mira knew was that this meeting wasn't chance, it was destiny, shaped by promises made long before they were born. And somewhere in the mansion's hidden room, locked behind dust and time, an old letter waited to be found, one that would shatter everything they believed about the Armand family and themselves.
The following evening, the Armand mansion was lit like a cathedral of glass and gold. Every chandelier flickered to life, and the long dining table gleamed under candlelight, as though the house itself sensed something important was about to happen. Mira stood nervously at the edge of the hall, holding a tray of teacups. She wasn't used to such grand dinners. She'd only ever served Evelina in the quiet comfort of her garden room. But tonight, the old woman had insisted she join them. Evelina, regal in emerald silk, tapped her spoon gently on the table. "Sit, child," she said with a smile. "You work too hard to just stand and watch." Mira hesitated. "Oh, no, Mrs. Armand, I shouldn't—" "Nonsense," Evelina said, her tone brooking no argument. "I invited you, and in this house, my invitation is law." At the far end of the table, Jareth looked up from his phone, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Grandmother, what exactly is this?" Evelina turned her sharp eyes toward him. "A family dinner." "She's not family," Jareth said flatly. "Not yet," Evelina murmured, almost to herself, as she poured Mira a glass of water. Dinner began in uneasy silence. The clink of silverware was the only sound for several long minutes. Mira tried not to stare, but the walls were covered in portraits, generations of Ardmans looking down with the same piercing gray eyes. She wondered what they'd think of her, a simple girl from the outskirts sitting at their table. Jareth broke the silence first. "So, Mira," he said coolly, "how does one go from gardening to dining in mansions?" Evelina shot him a warning glance. Mira forced a small smile. "I didn't plan to. Life just planted me here." Jareth arched a brow. "Planted you?" She nodded shyly. "Sometimes the wind carries seeds where they're meant to grow." For a fleeting second, something softened in his eyes. Then he looked away, his voice quieter. "The wind doesn't care where things land." Maybe not, but the earth still decides what survives. Evelina hid a smile behind her glass. The girl had spirit, soft but unbreakable. And Jareth, though he'd never admit it, was listening more closely than he had to anyone in years.
Halfway through dinner, a sharp crack of thunder echoed outside. The lights flickered briefly, and Mira instinctively reached for the candle in front of her to steady it. Her hand brushed Jareth's, just for an instant, but it was enough. A strange jolt, warm and electric, passed between them. He froze, eyes meeting hers. Something in that touch felt familiar, too familiar. Evelina noticed the exchange but said nothing. Her mind wandered back to the locked wing upstairs, the one her late son had sealed decades ago. She whispered silently, "Forgive me, Gabriel. The truth must come out someday." When the storm passed, dinner ended quietly. Mira helped clear the table, her heart still fluttering with confusion. She hadn't expected kindness from the Armandaire, nor that touch that felt like memory instead of accident. Later that night, as she returned to her small quarters near the garden, she found a folded napkin tucked into her pocket. Her name was written in neat handwriting. Inside, a single line, "Meet me in the conservatory. Midnight." Her breath caught. The handwriting, it wasn't Jareth's, it was Evelina's.
The conservatory at night was a different world. Silver moonlight pooled across the marble floor, and the roses glowed faintly under the skylight's reflection. Mira entered quietly, the scent of jasmine wrapping around her. Evelina was already there, sitting in her wheelchair, her eyes distant but kind. "I hope you're not frightened," she said gently. "Just surprised," Mira replied, clutching the note. "Why did you want to see me?" Evelina's hands rested on her lap. "Because I see something in you, child. Something this house hasn't felt in decades. You bring light into dark rooms." Mira blushed. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Evelina whispered. "You're healing what was broken." She turned her gaze toward a portrait hanging above the fireplace, a young man and woman standing together. "That's my son, Gabriel," she said quietly, "and his wife. Your face reminds me of her." Mira stepped closer, studying the painting. "She's beautiful," she said. Evelina's lips trembled. "She was. But beauty doesn't always save you from sorrow." There was something in her tone, something unspoken, that made Mira's chest tighten. Before she could ask more, Evelina reached for her hand. "Promise me, Mira," she said, her eyes fierce now. "No matter what you find in this house, don't stop being kind. People here have forgotten how." Mira nodded softly. "I promise." Evelina smiled faintly, as if that answer eased a burden she had carried for years. "Good," she whispered, "because you're going to need that kindness more than you know." That night, as Mira returned to her room, she passed by Jareth's study. The door was ajar, and she caught a glimpse of him staring at an old photograph, one she hadn't seen before. It was of a young woman with the same eyes as her own mother. Mira froze. Jareth looked up, startled. "What are you doing here?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She turned and hurried away. Jareth stared after her, the photograph trembling in his hand. For the first time, he wasn't sure if what his grandmother was planning was about love or a reckoning long overdue. Morning light poured through the tall glass windows of the Armand mansion, glinting off the marble floors. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean, but inside the house, silence carried a strange tension. Mira moved quietly through the halls with a vase of fresh lilies, but her thoughts kept circling back to the portrait Evelina had shown her, Gabriel and his wife, the woman who looked hauntingly familiar. The resemblance had been undeniable. It wasn't just in the eyes or the soft smile, it was in something deeper, a feeling she couldn't name. She passed the grand staircase where Jareth stood, already dressed in his charcoal suit, his tie perfectly knotted, expression unreadable. He looked every bit the CEO his family expected him to be, except for the flicker of distraction in his eyes when he saw her. "You're up early," he said lowly. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, setting the vase on a nearby table. "The rain was loud." He looked toward the window. "You'll get used to it here. The storms never really stop, they just change shape." Mira tilted her head. "That sounds sad." "It's just honest," he replied, but his tone softened. "Besides, this house has seen worse storms than thunder." Something in his voice made her pause. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then turned away. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "I might," she said gently. Their eyes met, his guarded, hers open, and for a fleeting moment, Jareth wondered how a girl who'd only been in his life for days could make the air feel so much lighter. Later that morning, while cleaning the conservatory, Mira found an old wooden box beneath a bench of orchids. The hinges were rusted, the lock barely holding. Curiosity tugged at her fingers, and before she could stop herself, she opened it. Inside were faded photographs, brittle letters, and a locket wrapped in cloth. The locket shimmered faintly, a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent, etched with the Armand crest. Her heart pounded. She had seen this design before, on the gates outside and carved into the stone fireplace in the main hall, but this one felt warm, like it remembered the hands that once held it. She unfolded one of the letters, the paper yellowed with age. The handwriting was elegant, fragile.
If the child survives, send her away. No one must know until the house is ready to forgive. Mira's stomach tightened. The signature was smudged, but one word was clear: Gabriel. She stood frozen, the realization settling over her like cold rain. Before she could read further, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She turned quickly. Jareth stood in the doorway, his expression dark. "What are you doing with that?" he demanded. I found it here. I didn't mean—"
He strode forward, snatching the box from the bench. His hands trembled slightly, though his tone stayed sharp. "This is private property." Her voice was small, but steady. It looked like someone wanted it to be found. His jaw clenched. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Maybe not. But it's not just about your family, is it?" He froze, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" "The truth. The letter," she said quietly. "It mentioned a child being sent away." He turned to her fully now, and for the first time she saw something behind his anger: fear. "You don't understand. My father, he stopped himself, shaking his head. "You shouldn't have seen that. I'm sorry. I just felt like it was calling to me." Jareth exhaled sharply, pressing his fingers to his temple. "You're not safe here if you keep digging where you shouldn't." "Safe from what?" He looked up at her, his eyes tired, not cold, but haunted. "From the truth." That night, Jareth couldn't sleep. The memory of Mira's frightened face replayed over and over. He poured himself a drink, staring at the rain-soaked city below. On his desk lay the letter she'd found, now unfolded, its words swimming in his mind. He knew what it meant. His father had spoken of a mistake, something that could ruin the Armand name if revealed. Jareth had always assumed it was about money, maybe a secret deal, but now he wasn't sure. He reached for the photograph she'd seen, his mother holding a baby wrapped in a pale blanket. He turned it over, his breath catching as he read the faded note on the back. Mira. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. Meanwhile, Mira sat in her small room, clutching the pendant she'd found. It felt alive in her palm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She couldn't explain it, but when she closed her eyes, she saw flashes. A woman's hand reaching out, firelight, a child crying in the distance. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "If you ever find where you came from, be brave enough to stay." Mira's eyes opened, tears glimmering. She finally understood. This house wasn't just her workplace. It was where her story began.
The morning after the storm was deceptively peaceful. Sunlight spilled through the glass dome above the main hall, casting soft patterns on the marble floor. Yet the mansion itself seemed to hum with unease, like the walls remembered last night's whispers. Mira hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the words from that letter echoed back. If the child survives, send her away. By the time the clock struck 7, she'd made up her mind. She couldn't carry that secret alone. She walked down the hall to Evelina Armand's private study, the one filled with ancient portraits and the smell of old paper and lavender. The elderly woman sat by the window, her silver hair pinned back, sunlight touching her face like a blessing she didn't quite believe in. "Mira," she said softly, without turning, "I was wondering when you'd come." Mira froze. "You knew?" Evelina smiled faintly, her reflection flickering in the glass. "When you found the box, yes. That's why I didn't stop you." "Why?" Mira asked, voice trembling. "Why would you let me see it?" Evelina turned to her now, her eyes pale but piercing. "Because that letter was meant to find its way home someday, and maybe it finally has." Mira's throat tightened. It mentioned a child, someone sent away. Who was it? The old woman's gaze drifted toward a large covered portrait at the far end of the room. The drape hung heavy over the frame, untouched for years. Slowly, Evelina rose and walked to it. Her hands shook as she pulled the cloth away. Beneath it was a painting of a woman, young, graceful, with eyes that glowed like warm amber. In her arms she held a newborn wrapped in white silk. Mira's breath caught. The woman looked exactly like her mother. Her name was Isola, my daughter-in-law. Your mother. Mira staggered back, the air rushing from her lungs. That's not possible. She loved Gabriel more than her own life, but the family, our name, demanded purity, control, bloodline. When she became pregnant, Gabriel feared the truth of her past would ruin everything. So he sent her away after the birth. The letter, Mira whispered, the child sent away. Was me? Evelina nodded slowly. He believed it was mercy. I called it cowardice. Mira's hands trembled at her sides. He threw us away? He left her alone? He did, Evelina said, her voice breaking. But he also died trying to undo it. Mira's head snapped up. What do you mean? Gabriel didn't abandon his guilt. He spent years searching for you, the daughter he had buried in silence. When he found out Isola was gone, he never forgave himself. His last words to me were, "Find her. Tell her I was wrong." Tears streamed down Mira's cheeks. For the first time, the mansion's silence didn't feel empty. It felt like it was listening.
Hours later, Jareth stood outside the same door, his heart pounding. He'd overheard enough to understand what he couldn't before. Mira wasn't a stranger who had stumbled into his family's world. She was family. The revelation churned inside him like a storm. The girl who'd reminded him what gentleness felt like was the same one his father had hidden from the world. He stepped inside, his presence silent but sharp. Evelina turned first. "You heard, didn't you?" "I had to," Jareth said quietly. "It's my family too." Mira wiped her tears, trying to steady herself. "So, what now?" He looked at her, his jaw tight. "Now you decide what you want to do with the truth." "What can I do?" she asked. "I was erased from this family before I could even speak." "You can take it back. Your name, your place." Mira shook her head. "A name built on lies isn't something I want." Jareth stepped closer, his voice softening. "Then rebuild it, the right way." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was fragile, part sorrow, part something unspoken that neither dared to name. Then Evelina placed a hand on Mira's shoulder. "Your mother's portrait hangs in the East Wing. If you truly want to know her, start there." That night, when the mansion slept, Mira lit a single candle and walked down the east corridor. Dust floated like ghosts in the dim air. The portraits of the Armand lineage watched her pass. Proud faces, cruel eyes, painted legacies. At the very end hung the portrait of Isola. Mira stopped in front of it, her reflection flickering in the candlelight. Her mother's painted eyes seemed alive, full of secrets, full of sorrow. And at that moment, Mira felt it again, that soft hum beneath the walls, like a heartbeat. Not of the mansion, but of the past, finally stirring awake.
The following morning arrived gray and heavy, as though the sky itself carried the Armand family's guilt. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm, horns, chatter, and footsteps, but inside the mansion, time felt different, slow, suffocating. Mira sat in the portrait room again, staring at her mother's painted face. The candle she'd left overnight had melted into a silver puddle on the floor. Jareth appeared in the doorway, his voice careful. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry," Mira murmured. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her, like she's still waiting for me to find something. Jareth leaned against the frame. Maybe she is. He hesitated before stepping closer. Mira, there's something you should see. I think it's connected. Her head lifted slightly. What is it? A document. A private contract my father signed years ago. I found a record of it last night while searching through the estate archives. But the physical copy, it's missing. Mira frowned. What kind of contract? He looked at her then, eyes dark with conflict. The kind that names you. Her breath caught. What? Jareth nodded. It's called the Legacy Transfer Agreement. It was supposed to take effect if my father passed before a certain age. According to what I found, it doesn't name me as the full heir. It names two. Two? Yes. His gaze held hers. You and me. Mira froze, her thoughts crashing in waves. That's impossible. I thought so too, Jareth said, rubbing his temple. But the archives don't lie. The family lawyer sealed the records after my father's death, said it was unfinished business. I think he knew about you. Mira's voice trembled. Why would your father make me heir to anything? Because he was trying to make things right, said another voice from the doorway. They both turned. Evelina stood there, her cane clicking softly against the marble. I told him he couldn't fix what was broken by throwing money at it, but he didn't listen. He wanted to protect you, even if you never knew.
Mira's jaw clenched. Protect me by hiding me my entire life? Evelina said. He feared what his brothers would do if they learned the truth. The board, the shareholders, they would have destroyed him. And you. He signed the contract in secret, but never had the chance to reveal it before his accident. Mira repeated slowly. Accident? You mean his car crash? Jareth stiffened. Evelina met her gaze. Yes, the one that killed him. Silence hung between them like smoke. Mira could almost hear the blood rushing in her ears. Then Jareth whispered, You think someone caused it? Evelina said quietly, I don't think. I know. Mira's heart dropped. Who? Someone who stood to lose everything if Gabriel's contract surfaced. The implication hit like thunder. Jareth's uncle, Victor Armand, the man currently sitting on the company's throne. Evelina turned away, her voice a whisper. He always wanted power, and he never forgave Gabriel for being chosen as heir. Jareth's expression hardened. If that contract still exists, it's proof that the company doesn't belong to Victor. It belongs to father and to Mira. Mira stepped back overwhelmed. No, I didn't ask for any of this. I don't want his empire. Evelina looked at her sharply. It isn't about what you want, child. It's about what's owed. Your mother died because of this family's sins. If you walk away, her story ends in silence again. Mira's chest ached, torn between anger and grief. Jareth spoke gently. You don't have to fight them alone. She looked up at him, and for a moment she saw it, the same haunted look her mother had in that portrait, the look of someone standing between love and duty.
That night, Jareth broke into his father's old office in the downtown Armand Tower. The building loomed over the skyline, glass, steel, and secrets. He moved quietly, avoiding the security cameras, guided only by his phone's flashlight and memory. Behind a hidden panel, he found a safe, and inside the safe, a folder sealed with the Armand family crest. He opened it slowly. Inside were 2 pages, the contract and a photograph. The contract named Mira Solon as co-heir. The photograph showed a woman holding a baby beside a man smiling awkwardly. His father. Jareth exhaled shakily. It's real. But as he turned the page, a shadow shifted behind him. A voice whispered from the dark, "You shouldn't have found that." He spun around. It was Victor, Armand. The air inside the office turned colder the instant Victor Armand stepped out of the shadows. He was older than Jareth remembered, silver hair combed with precision, suit tailored to intimidation. His cane wasn't for support. It was a weapon disguised as an accessory. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make the air obey. Jareth froze, the folder still open in his hand. Victor's eyes flicked down to it, then back up, cold, unblinking. "So," he said softly, "you finally found it." "I'm not giving this to you," Jareth said, his voice tighter than he expected. Victor smiled, slow, deliberate, predatory. "Oh, Jareth, you've inherited your father's bravery. Unfortunately, bravery without power is just suicide." He began to circle the desk, the click of his cane echoing across the marble. "You think this contract means anything? The moment Gabriel died, so did his promises. Do you really believe the board would let an illegitimate child walk into their empire and claim half of it? They'll burn her alive before they let that happen." Jareth clenched his fists. "You're afraid. That's why you've hidden it." Victor stopped, smiling faintly. "Afraid? No, boy. I'm protecting what's mine. Gabriel's mistakes nearly ruined us once. I won't let sentimentality do it again." The silence between them grew razor thin. Then Victor's gaze hardened. "You're going to hand me that folder, now." Jareth's pulse thundered in his ears. "No." Victor sighed, tapping his cane once. "I warned you." The lights flickered, and two men in suits stepped through the door behind him. Security, hired silence. Jareth stepped back, clutching the folder. "If anything happens to me, this goes public." Victor smirked. "Then you'd better be very careful not to have an accident." He turned to leave, his men following, but just before stepping out he looked over his shoulder and said quietly, "Tell Mira Solon that she should stop chasing ghosts. They tend to bite." The door shut behind him with a soft, final click. Jareth stood in the dark, breathing hard. He looked at the folder again, then pulled out his phone, snapping quick photos of every page. "Not this time. You don't get to erase people anymore." At that same hour, across the city, Mira sat by her small apartment window, unable to sleep. Rain streamed down the glass, painting the city lights into trembling streaks. Her mother's necklace rested in her palm, warm from her touch. She kept replaying Evelina's words in her head. "He wanted to protect you." Protect her from what? From whom? And now, this contract, her name tied to the very empire that had destroyed her mother's life. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jareth. "We need to meet. Now. He knows." Her blood went cold. They met in a quiet parking garage beneath the old Armand Tower. The rain's echo mixed with the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Jareth looked pale, shaken. "He was waiting for me," he said. "He knows we found it. He threatened us both." Mira's hands tightened around her coat. "What did he say?" "That you should stop chasing ghosts." Her eyes flashed. "Then he just told me where to look." Jareth hesitated. "Mira, this isn't a game. He has reach, the board, the police, the press. If this contract comes out, they'll bury it, and maybe us." She stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. My mother spent her life hiding from this family. I'm done hiding. For a moment, Jareth just stared at her, seeing not the timid woman he met in the gardens, but someone burning with her mother's fire. Then he nodded slowly. Then we do this together. She exhaled, trembling, half fear, half determination. What's the next step? He pulled the last page from the folder. There's an address written here, in the margins. It's in the old district. I think it's where your mother kept her research. If we find that, we'll know why Victor killed to keep it buried. Mira swallowed hard. Then that's where we go. Jareth glanced toward the ramp, his expression grave. Tomorrow night, we'll find out what she left behind. And as they stood beneath the flickering lights, neither of them noticed the black car idling 2 floors above, or the pair of eyes watching from the shadows, waiting for them to make their next move.
The rain had not stopped by the next evening. It came down in steady sheets that blurred the skyline of Halewind City into silver ghosts. Mara and Jareth stood before a long-forgotten building at the edge of the industrial district, its brick walls blackened with age, windows boarded up, the sign above the rusted gates barely legible. Solen Biotech, Research Division. Mara stared at the name. Solen. Her mother's name before she became Armand's secret. Her breath caught. She owned this place? Jareth nodded, scanning the dark street behind them. According to the company registry, yes. She founded it right before she disappeared. He forced a nervous smile. You sure about this? Mara took a slow breath. She left this for a reason. We'll never know the truth unless we go in. He pried the gate open, the metal shrieking through the night. Inside, the smell of dust and damp air filled their lungs. Broken equipment lay scattered across the floors. Microscopes, empty vials, papers half burned. Mira's flashlight game moved across the walls until it stopped on a line of writing scratched into the concrete, faint but deliberate. Truth is not destroyed. It is only buried. She touched the letters with trembling fingers. She wrote this? Jareth's eyes softened. Then we're standing in the grave she built for her secrets. They moved deeper inside, every step echoing through the hollow corridors. A power panel flickered faintly in the corner, still alive somehow. Jareth crouched beside it, brushing away dust. Looks like backup generators. Let's see if we can bring the lights up. He flipped a few switches, and the building shuddered awake. Dim fluorescent lights buzzed to life, revealing walls lined with old data servers and sealed glass cases labeled Project Irene. Mara read the tag aloud. Irene. That means peace. Jareth frowned. Or control. Depends on who's defining it. At the far end of the room was a steel door marked Authorized Access Only. Mara hesitated. This feels wrong. Jareth smiled faintly. That's how we know we're close. He entered a code scratched on the margin of the contract they'd found. The lock clicked open with a slow hiss. The room beyond was pristine, untouched by time. Rows of glowing screens lit up automatically as they entered. In the center stood a single glass pod, its surface fogged. Inside was nothing but wires and shards of broken circuitry, the remains of something once alive with light. Mira approached slowly. What is this place? Jareth scanned the terminal beside it. It's a neural imprint lab. Your mother was building something far ahead of her time. He looked up at her. Something to read and store consciousness? Her heart pounded. You mean like capture a person's mind? Or rewrite it, he murmured. Mira stepped back dizzy. She wouldn't do that. He hesitated. Maybe not by choice. Mira's hands shook as she pressed the button. Her mother's voice filled the room, calm, tired, full of love and regret. If anyone finds this, especially you, Mira, I pray the cycle has ended.
They used my research to strip choice from people's minds. Victor promised Gabriel it would make humanity stronger, but all it did was make them gods over others. I destroyed what I could, but one fragment remains, hidden beneath the Armid estate. If it wakes, it will destroy everything we are. Please, don't trust anyone who carries the Armid name. The recording stopped. Silence. Mira's throat closed. She could barely breathe. Her mother had known. She'd tried to stop it, and failed. Jareth turned toward her, his voice low. This is why Victor's afraid. If this comes out, it destroys the family legacy. It shows the Armids weren't innovators, they were manipulators. Mira sank to the floor, clutching the necklace at her chest. She died for this, and all I've done is reopen her grave. Jareth knelt beside her. No, you're finishing what she couldn't. Outside lightning flashed, and a shape moved through the rain. A man in a dark coat stood at the edge of the street, a phone pressed to his ear. She found it. Yes, I'll take care of it tonight. Inside the lab, Mira wiped her tears. We can't just take this to the police. They'll bury it before it reaches daylight. Jareth nodded grimly. Then we take it somewhere else. Somewhere the Armids can't reach. He packed the hard drives, sealing them in his backpack. But as they turned to leave, the lights flickered, and a low mechanical hum rose from beneath the floor. Mira froze. What's that sound? The ground trembled once, then a metallic voice whispered through the speakers. Genetic match confirmed. Solon line active. Jareth's face drained of color. Mira, it's recognizing you. The pod at the center of the room began to glow, its broken circuitry knitting back together, light rippling across its surface like veins awakening. Mira stepped back, her pulse racing. What's happening? Jareth's voice was barely a whisper. Your mother didn't destroy it. She sealed it with your blood. The pod's surface cracked open, light spilling out in a slow, pulsing rhythm. A whisper filled the air, soft and feminine, her mother's voice. If you hear this, my child, the machine has awakened, and now the choice is yours. Mira stood frozen, bathed in golden light. Jareth reached for her arm, eyes wide. Mira, we have to go. But she didn't move. She could feel it. The same warmth her mother described, flowing through her veins like memory returning to the body that birthed it. The light pulsed once more, and the power cut out. Darkness swallowed them both. The storm outside had quieted, but inside the abandoned lab, silence carried its own roar. The shattered monitors still hummed faintly, their screens bleeding with fragments of color, like dying embers. Mira's fingers brushed the cracked floor tiles, as if the answers she'd chased all her life might still be hidden there. Jareth, this place feels alive, she whispered. He glanced at her, his usual composure fractured by unease. Alive, or haunted, he murmured. I can't tell which. Then it happened. The faint glow pulsing from one of the pods near the back wall. It flickered like a heartbeat, steady and deliberate. The energy that had long been dormant now shimmered through the dust, lighting the faces of both intruders in pale gold. Mira moved closer, breath trembling. On the side of the pod, beneath layers of grime, were faded letters. Project Solon. Her own surname. Her knees weakened. No, that's... The pod came fully alive with a soft hum, and suddenly, light spilled across the lab in a blinding wave. It wasn't just illumination, it was memory. They weren't standing in ruins anymore. The room around them reformed, bright, sterile, humming with life and ambition. Men and women in white coats moved between consoles. Machines gleamed like futuristic altars. And at the center,
stood Dr. Mariel Solon, Mira's mother, radiant, brilliant, and heartbreakingly young. "Test sequence 9, she said, voice calm and controlled. "Synchronization stable at 78%. Prepared to record full transfer." A familiar figure stood behind her, tall, cold, and commanding. Victor Armand.
He looked younger, too, but his eyes held the same ruthless light that haunted Mira's childhood memories. "Are you sure it's safe this time?" he asked. "Nothing like this is ever safe," Mariel replied quietly. "But we're not gods, Victor. We can't rewrite the mind, only mirror it." He smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure the reflection obeys." The scientists obeyed his signal. The machine roared to life. A young boy lay on the table, barely breathing. His eyelashes fluttered, a tear slipping down his temple. Mira whispered, "That's Gabriel, my brother." The projection glitched. Her mother's voice grew louder, desperate. "Victor, stop! His brain patterns are destabilizing." "He's my heir," Victor said coldly. "If he breaks, I'll build him again." The machine flashed white. Gabriel screamed. And Mariel turned, directly toward the place where Mira and Jareth stood, as though she could see them through time. "If anyone finds this," her voice echoed through the collapsing light, "tell my daughter she was never an accident. Tell her I chose her over the Empire." The vision shattered. Mira fell to her knees, gasping. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. Her mother's last words echoed in her mind. "I chose her." Jareth's voice broke the silence. "So your mother wasn't their pawn. She was their threat." Mira stood slowly, her expression shifting from grief to steel. "No," she said quietly. "She was their weapon, and I'm what they couldn't control." The flickering light behind them died completely. Outside, the storm began again, thunder rolling like the voice of something long buried, now waking.
The city slept beneath a sheet of silver rain, its skyline glimmering like glass tears. From the penthouse window of the Armand Tower, Gabriel stood in silence, his reflection fractured against the storm. The memories he never asked for replayed like ghosts behind his eyes. The screaming boy on the table, his mother's trembling voice, the blinding white of the lab. "Project Solon," he whispered to himself, his hands curling into fists. "They lied to us all." The elevator chimed softly behind him. Mira stepped out, drenched from the rain, her coat clinging to her skin. She looked fragile, but her eyes carried the calm fury of someone who had stopped being afraid. "You knew," she said, "didn't you?" Gabriel didn't turn at first. "I didn't know everything," he said, his voice low. "Only what Father allowed." Mira took a few steps closer. "You helped him bury it. You let me grow up thinking Mother was the villain." Now he turned, and the look in his eyes wasn't cruelty. It was guilt, sharpened into survival. "You don't understand what he's capable of, Mira," Gabriel said, stepping closer. "Victor doesn't forgive. He doesn't lose. If I hadn't obeyed, you'd be the one buried, not her." Her throat tightened. "So you lied to save yourself?" Gabriel's jaw trembled. "I lied to keep you alive." The silence that followed was suffocating, the kind that only exists between people who once shared everything and now stand on opposite sides of truth. Lightning split the sky, throwing light across the room, and for a second, Mira saw it clearly. The scar at the base of Gabriel's neck, faint but metallic. "What did he do to you?" she whispered.
Gabriel froze. His hand instinctively brushed the spot. But the damage was already done. The silence spoke louder than words.
He made me part of it, he said finally. The same experiment. I'm not what I used to be, Mira, and neither are you. She took a step back, trembling. He used us both. Gabriel's voice broke. No, he created us to replace himself. The words hung in the air, monstrous, unbelievable, and yet too real to deny. Mira's heart pounded, her world tilted. Every piece of her life, every lie, every memory had been engineered to keep her obedient, quiet, unaware. You can't stop him alone, Gabriel said, reaching out. He's already begun the next phase. He's not trying to build heirs anymore. He's trying to live forever. Mira's eyes hardened. Then he'll have to die first. She turned away, heading for the elevator, but paused just before the doors closed. One more thing, she said softly. When I find him, don't stand in my way again. The doors slid shut, and Gabriel was left staring at his own reflection in the glass. Outside, thunder rolled through the skyline, not as a warning, but as a promise.
The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime that echoed through the marble corridor of Armand Tower's top floor. Mira stepped out, her reflection gliding across the polished surface like a shadow of who she used to be. Gone was the timid girl who'd once bowed under the weight of family secrets. What stood here now was someone who understood power and pain. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, the empire her father built sat waiting. Men in dark suits, their eyes cold and assessing. At the head of the table sat Lucien Armand, the man who'd once called her an embarrassment. He looked older now, sharper somehow, like a blade that had been honed by regret, but not softened by it. "Mira," he greeted, voice low but heavy with warning. "You weren't invited to this meeting." She smiled faintly. "I didn't need an invitation. The name on this building belongs to my blood too." Whispers rippled through the room. One of the directors adjusted his tie, muttering about security. But Lucien raised a hand. His eyes studied her, not with affection, but with something that almost looked like recognition. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked finally. Mira placed a single folder on the table. Her mother's research, the documents Armand had buried decades ago. "Bringing back what you tried to erase, Father. And I'm done being quiet." A silence followed, deep and electric. Lucien leaned back, his lips curving in something close to amusement. "You think truth will destroy me? You think they'll care where the fortune came from?" His eyes glimmered. "Power doesn't ask for forgiveness. It commands loyalty." She met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll be the first to disobey."
For the first time, the mask slipped from his face. Rage flashed in his eyes, but behind it, there was something else. Fear. Because he saw it now, the same fire that once burned in Amara's eyes, the woman he had loved and betrayed. "You're just like her," he said, voice trembling. "I hope so," Mira whispered. Without another word, she opened the folder and slid the documents toward the board. Every secret, every falsified report, every suppressed patent, all of it laid bare. The room erupted in murmurs. Lucien stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble. "You think this will save you? You'll bring down everything, the company, the name, me." Mira's eyes softened. Maybe it's time it all came down, so something honest can rise. The boardroom door opened suddenly. Rowan stood there, eyes flicking between them. "They're broadcasting the story," he said quietly. "It's already everywhere." Lucian turned, his voice breaking with fury. "You—" But Mira stepped between them. "It's over, Father. You can fight the world, or you can face the truth." He stared at her for a long time, breathing hard, his empire collapsing in the reflection of his daughter's steady gaze. Then, slowly, Lucian sank back into his chair, silent, defeated. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The storm that had been building for years had finally broken. Mira stood by the window, watching the skyline light up with flashes of lightning. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the only way to inherit a legacy is to burn it first." Rowan looked at her, eyes filled with something between sorrow and admiration. "And what will you build from the ashes?" Mira turned slightly, her reflection merging with the city lights. "Something that won't forget where it came from." And with that, she walked out of the boardroom, not as a lost daughter anymore, but as the rightful heir to both truth and ruin.
The morning after the boardroom reckoning, the world felt colder, sharper. News drones buzzed over the city like restless wasps, projecting headlines across skyscraper screens. Armand Empire crumbles amid scandal. Daughter exposes decades of fraud and human trials. Lucien Armand in hiding. Mira watched from the window of her small apartment. No longer the penthouse her father had offered, but a modest place with peeling paint and honest air. The streets below were alive with chaos. Reporters, protesters, ex-employees clutching signs demanding answers. She held a mug of cold coffee, untouched, as Rowan leaned against the counter behind her. His tie was loosened, his voice quiet. "You did it. You actually brought them down." Mira didn't smile. "It doesn't feel like victory." Because it isn't. It's justice, and justice is never clean. Her phone vibrated again, another anonymous threat, another headline, another reminder that truth had a cost. "They're painting me as the traitor now," she murmured. "The woman who destroyed everything her father built." Rowan crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder. "He built lies. You built courage."
"They'll learn the difference." But even as he said it, they both knew the empire's fall had left a crater. Thousands of jobs vanished overnight, investors fled, families who'd built their lives on Armand Industries' promises were suddenly adrift. And in the center of it all stood Mira, the girl who dared to tear down her father's kingdom. A knock echoed on the door. Mira froze. Rowan's hand went instinctively to the concealed weapon under his jacket. When the door opened, Amara's sister Liana stood there. Older, frailer, but with the same steel in her eyes. "Mira," she breathed, stepping inside. "You've done what your mother couldn't." Mira's voice trembled. "You knew? All this time?" Liana nodded, tears gathering. "I begged your mother to leave it buried, but she believed the truth deserved light, even if it killed her. And now you've carried her torch." Mira's heart clenched. "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I just broke the world." Liana cupped her face gently. "Maybe the world needed breaking. Some legacies must shatter before they heal." From the window, the distant skyline still glowed with the fading logo of Armand Industries, flickering like a dying heartbeat. As night fell, Mira and Rowan stood on the rooftop overlooking the city she had changed forever. The air smelled like rain and electricity, the same scent that always came before renewal. Rowan glanced at her. "What happens now?" Mira inhaled slowly, her gaze on the horizon. "I rebuild. Not for him, not for me, for every name his company erased." He smiled faintly. "Then you're not your father's heir?" "No," she said, eyes soft but certain. "I'm my mother's." Thunder rolled in the distance, low and steady, not a warning this time, but a promise. Below them, the last Armand Tower lights blinked out one by one until the city was left in silence. And somewhere in that quiet, Mira finally felt free. Days turned into weeks, but the storm never really ended. The fall of Armand Industries had become the city's greatest scandal, and Mira, its reluctant face. Her every move was scrutinized, every silence twisted into headlines. The press called her the heiress who burned her throne. Protesters called her the reason they lost their jobs. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Mira began to wonder, had she done the right thing, or simply traded one kind of corruption for another? She sat alone in hearing room, the sound of cameras clicking beyond the glass. The Federal Inquiry Board had summoned her to testify about the experiments her father's company had hidden, human testing masked as cognitive enhancement trials. Victims' families filled the seats behind her, their grief pressing like a weight. When her name's called, she rose. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice did not. I didn't come here to defend what my family did. I came here because silence was killing people long before I spoke. The board members exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others skeptical. Questions followed, hard ones, accusations too. But through it all, Mira stayed composed. Every word she spoke carried her mother's strength. Every pause echoed her years of pain. When it was over, she stepped outside, into a sea of microphones and flashing lights. Rowan was waiting, his expression tight. You handled it perfectly. She gave a tired smile. Perfect doesn't fix the damage. Nope, Rowan admitted, but it tells the world who you really are. They started walking down the courthouse steps when a black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and Lucien Armand was inside, her father. He looked older now, thinner, but his presence still carried that sharp, commanding energy. "Get in," he said simply. Rowan stepped forward, instantly on guard. "You're not going anywhere with him." Mira held up a hand. "It's okay." Her voice was calm, but her pulse raced. She opened the door and slid into the car. The city blurred past as they drove in silence. Finally, Lucien spoke. "You think you've won, don't you?" His tone was low, bitter. "I didn't want to win," Mira said softly. "I wanted the truth." He scoffed. "Truth is a luxury for the powerless. You're an Armand. You were born to command it." She turned to him, eyes cold. "No, father. I was born to end it." For the first time, Lucien's mask cracked. His hand trembled slightly on the steering wheel. "You sound just like her." "My mother?" Mira asked. He nodded slowly. "She thought she could purify the family name with honesty, but the world doesn't reward honesty. It punishes it. And now it will punish you." The car pulled into the shadow of the old Armand estate, boarded up, abandoned. The very place where her mother had once begged him to stop. Lucien leaned closer, his voice trembling between pride and regret. "You've destroyed me, Mira, but in doing so, you've become me." Mira met his gaze, tears stinging her eyes. "No, I've become what you could have been, if you'd ever loved something more than power." She opened the door, stepping out into the dying light. The house loomed before her, silent, decaying, but still standing, just like the legacy she now carried. Lucien didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the daughter who had broken his empire. As the car drove away, Mira whispered to the wind, "The echoes stop here." And somewhere deep in the shadows of the estate, a single light flickered to life, a sensor triggered by her voice, as if the house itself had recognized the change.
The next morning, the rain fell like the sky was trying to wash the city clean, but some stains, Mira knew, ran too deep. She walked through the abandoned Armand estate, the scent of damp stone and dust thick in the air. The house that once screamed wealth now whispered secrets. Shattered chandeliers, cracked portraits, silence echoing where laughter once lived. In her hand, she held the small brass key her mother had left behind, the one hidden inside the locket that fell open the night she died. For years, Mira had thought it was just a keepsake, but now she knew better. The study door creaked open, revealing a room preserved in time, her mother's handwriting still faint on the walls, diagrams of early biotech models pinned to corkboards. A glass cabinet stood in the corner, its lock matching the key in her palm. When the lock clicked open, Mira's breath caught. Inside were notebooks, hundreds of them, bound in faded leather, each labeled Project Heirloom. She opened the first one, her mother's neat script still clear despite the years. They said our children would carry the burden of our brilliance. I fear they were right. She turned the page, sketches of DNA structures, notes about gene splicing research, human development tests that predated her father's public experiments by years. But there was more, a name repeated in the margins, Edenvale. Her brows furrowed. "Who are you?" she whispered. Hours passed as she pieced the truth together. Edenvale had been one of her mother's earliest subjects, a young woman chosen for neurological synchronization trials. But she wasn't a test subject, she was family. Mira flipped to the last page. Her mother's final words were written there, jagged and trembling. "Eden was my first child. They took her before you were born. Your father called it necessary. I called it murder."
The journal fell from Mira's hands. The room spun. "I had a sister?" she whispered. Before she could process it, her phone buzzed. A message from Rowan. "Mira, turn on the news, now." She did, and froze. On the screen, a breaking news segment played. A woman in her early 30s, calm and poised, giving a live interview. The caption read, "Eden Vale, the true founder of Armand Biotech." Mira's heart stopped. The woman had her mother's eyes. Her voice was hauntingly familiar. "She's alive," Mira breathed. "She's alive." But the interview wasn't what shocked her most. It was what Eden said next. "I've returned not to claim a legacy, but to correct what my sister couldn't finish." Mira stumbled back from the screen, her pulse roaring in her ears. "She knows me." Rowan's voice came through on the phone, low and urgent. "She doesn't just know you, Mira. She's coming for what's left of the Armand name." Lightning cracked across the skyline. For a heartbeat, she saw her reflection in the window, and beside it, another face overlapping hers, faint and ghostly. 2 daughters, 1 legacy, and the truth their mother died trying to protect. Mira closed her eyes, whispering the name like a curse and a prayer all at once. Eden. And somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that now bore her name, Eden Vale smiled faintly, as if she had heard it.
The sky over Armand City turned crimson at dusk, a warning painted in light. The news still replayed Eden Vale's calm, confident voice on every screen. To the world, she was the forgotten genius, the rightful heir reclaiming her empire. To Mira, she was something else entirely, a wound reopened. She stood by the wide glass windows of Rowan's office, staring down at the chaos below. Reporters clustered outside Armand Tower, their shouts muffled by the storm. "She looks just like you," Rowan said quietly. Mira turned to him, eyes hollow. No, she looks like our mother, but she acts like my father. Rowan hesitated, stepping closer. Then maybe she's not your enemy. She took everything my mother died protecting, Mira snapped, and she's rewriting the truth like it's hers to tell. She pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket, the last piece of her mother's encrypted files. If I can unlock this, I'll know why she was erased from our history, why my mother had to die. Rowan's jaw tightened. Then let's finish what she started. That night, Mira walked alone into the Vale Research Center, a sleek tower pulsing with blue light. The receptionist greeted her nervously. Her name still carried weight, but tonight it was a name on borrowed time. She rode the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Eden was already waiting. Her sister's presence was magnetic, calm, commanding, terrifyingly familiar. "You came," Eden said softly, her smile practiced and perfect. "I wasn't sure you'd face me." "I didn't come for a reunion. I came for answers." Eden gestured toward the panoramic view of the city below. "Then look around. This is what answers look like: power, stability, respect. Everything Mother and Father wanted. Mother wanted truth. Father wanted control. And you," she paused, eyes narrowing, "want to wear both crowns." Eden's expression hardened. "You don't understand what I've sacrificed. They took my name, my childhood, my memories, and buried me in a lie. You got the light, Mira. I got the dark." "Then why not come to me?" Mira's voice broke. "We could have faced it together." "Because you were his favorite, the perfect daughter, the heir who didn't know she was built from my suffering."
The receptionist greeted her nervously. Her name still carried weight, but tonight it was a name on borrowed time. She rode the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Eden was already waiting. Her sister's presence was magnetic, calm, commanding, terrifyingly familiar. "You came," Eden said softly, her smile practiced and perfect. "I wasn't sure you'd face me." "I didn't come for a reunion," Mira said. "I came for answers." Eden gestured toward the panoramic view of the city below. "Then look around," Eden said. "This is what answers look like: power, stability, respect. Everything Mother and Father wanted. Mother wanted truth," Mira said coldly. "Father wanted control. And you," she paused, eyes narrowing, "you want to wear both crowns." Eden's expression hardened. "They took my name, my childhood, my memories, and buried me in a lie. You got the light, Mira. I got the dark." "Then why not come to me?" Mira's voice broke. "We could have faced it together." "Because you were his favorite, the perfect daughter, the heir who didn't know she was built from my suffering."
The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Mira's hands trembled. "So that's what this is about? Revenge?" Eden's gaze flickered to the pendant around Mira's neck, their mother's. "No, it's about balance. Everything Father created, everything he stole, everything he did to us, it's all still in his empire, and I'm going to burn it down." Before Mira could respond, the screens on the walls flickered to life. Surveillance footage, bank records, documents. Eden had hacked into the Armand servers. "You can't just destroy it," Mira shouted. "There are thousands of innocent lives tied to these companies." "Innocent?" Eden laughed bitterly. "There's no innocence in empire, only inheritance." Mira stepped closer, her voice steady despite her fear. "If you burn it all, you become what he was." Eden's smile faltered. "Maybe that's the price of justice.
No, Mira whispered. That's the cost of becoming a monster. The two sisters stood inches apart, reflections of each other, divided by everything their family had done. Eden reached for the pendant, her fingers trembling as she touched it. Mother gave this to you, didn't she? She wanted me to remember her love, Mira said. Eden's eyes softened for the first time. Then maybe she wanted me to remember her pain. She stepped back, voice breaking. I wish you hadn't come. I wish you hadn't left. And then, alarms blared, the building shook. Rowan's voice crackled through Mira's earpiece. She triggered a system wipe. You have to get out. Eden turned toward the screens, her expression unreadable. It's too late. The legacy ends tonight. But before she could activate the final command, Mira grabbed her wrist. No, we end it, together. Their eyes locked. 2 daughters, 1 fate. And for the first time in 20 years, they both hesitated.
The night the empire fell, the city didn't sleep. Sirens howled through the glass canyons of Armen, and the rain fell like judgment. Lightning flashed over the Vale Research Center, catching 2 figures on the roof, Mira Vale and her estranged sister, Eden. Smoke poured from the upper floors below them. Systems were crashing, files were burning. The dynasty their father built, the world they were both born from, was unraveling in real time. Eden stood by the edge, her white coat billowing in the storm, face illuminated by the pulsing red emergency lights. It's beautiful, isn't it? Watching it fall? Mira approached slowly, soaked and shaking. This isn't justice, Eden. This is ruin. Ruin is what he left us. I'm just giving it back. Mira reached out, her palm open, voice soft. Then give it to me. Let me carry it. We don't have to destroy everything, not like this. Eden's jaw clenched, her eyes glistening. You still believe there's something left to save? There is, Mira whispered. Us. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Thunder rolled across the skyline like distant applause. Then, the control panel behind Eden sparked, fire leapt up the wall. Eden froze. It's too late, she breathed. No, Mira said, darting forward. We can still stop it. Together they wrestled with the console, Eden's trembling fingers over the keys, Mira reading her mother's notes from the flash drive. Smoke filled the air, heat biting their skin. Rowan, Mira shouted into her calm, I need a manual override. I'm locked out, his voice came back, distorted by static. Mira, you've got to get out of there. But Mira didn't move. She turned to Eden. If this system wipes, it takes every file, every record of Mother's work, all her truth. Eden hesitated. That was the point. Then her death means nothing, Mira cried. Don't make her sacrifice vanish too. Eden's breath hitched. For the first time, her mask cracked. Tears cut through the soot on her cheeks. She was dying, Mira. And she told me to protect you, that you were her redemption. Mira froze. She told you that? Eden nodded. But I hated her for it. I thought she chose you over me. I didn't know she was choosing hope. Without another word, Eden slammed her hand down on the terminal and yanked out the core drive. Sparks exploded around them. The screen went dark. Silence. Then the rain came harder. Mira stared at her sister, chest heaving. You did it! Eden smiled faintly. We did it. But the roof cracked beneath their feet. Smoke choking the air, the explosion from below was building. Mira grabbed Eden's hand. Come on, we can make it. Eden looked at her and something in her eyes changed. Calm acceptance. You have to go. Eden! I started this fire. You'll end it. That's how it has to be. Before Mira could protest, Eden pushed her toward the emergency ladder, hard. Tell them the truth, she said softly, her voice fading in the roar of flame. The roof gave way.
Mira screamed her sister's name as the world turned white. Weeks later, the news called it an industrial collapse. The Vale legacy was declared dissolved. The city moved on, as cities do. But Mira didn't. She rebuilt slowly, not an empire, but a foundation. The Vale Trust, dedicated to transparency and ethics in science. The same truth her mother died for, and her sister burned for. Rowan stood beside her as cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions. She smiled politely, said her piece, and walked away from the microphones. That night, alone in her small office, she opened the drawer and took out the scorched pendant, her mother's, now welded to a broken data chip. When she plugged it in, a single file played.
Her mother's voice, faint and warm. "If you're hearing this, my daughters, it means you've both found your way home. Remember, legacy is not what we inherit, it's what we choose to become." Mira pressed a hand to her mouth, tears falling silently. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the rain. She whispered into the quiet, "We became something better, Mother." And somewhere deep in the memory of the burning tower, it felt like the Empire finally exhaled. That night, Mira walked alone into the Vale Research Center, a sleek tower pulsing with blue light. The receptionist greeted her nervously. Her name still carried weight, but tonight it was a name on borrowed time. She rode the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Eden was already waiting. Her sister's presence was magnetic, calm, commanding, terrifyingly familiar. "You came," Eden said softly, her smile practiced and perfect. "I didn't come for a reunion," Mira said. "I came for answers." Eden gestured toward the panoramic view of the city below. "Then look around. This is what answers look like. Power, stability, respect, everything Mother and Father wanted." "Mother wanted truth," Mira said coldly. "Father wanted control. And you," she paused, eyes narrowing, "you want to wear both crowns." Eden's expression hardened. "You don't understand what I've sacrificed. They took my name, my childhood, my memories, and buried me in a lie. You got the light, Mira. I got the dark." "Then why not come to me?" Mira's voice broke. "We could have faced it together." "Because he was his favorite, the perfect daughter, the heir who didn't know she was built from my suffering." The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Mira's hands trembled. "So, that's what this is about? Revenge?" Eden's gaze flickered to the pendant around Mira's neck, her mother's. "No, it's about balance. Everything Father created, everything he stole, everything he did to us, it's all still in his empire, and I'm going to burn it down." Before Mira could respond, the screens on the walls flickered to life, surveillance footage, bank records, documents. Eden had hacked into the Armand servers. "You can't just destroy it. There are thousands of innocent lives tied to these companies." "Innocent?" Eden laughed bitterly. "There's no innocence in empire, only inheritance." Mira stepped closer, her voice steady despite her fear. "If you burn it all, you become what he was." Eden's smile faltered. "Maybe that's the price of justice." "No," Mira whispered. "That's the cost of becoming a monster." The two sisters stood inches apart, reflections of each other, divided by everything their family had done. Eden reached for the pendant, her fingers trembling as she touched it. "Mother gave this to you, didn't she? She wanted me to remember her love," Mira said. Eden's eyes softened for the first time. "Then, maybe, she wanted me to remember her pain." She stepped back,
her voice breaking. "I wish you hadn't come. I wish you hadn't left." And then the alarms blared. The building shook. Rowan's voice crackled through Mira's earpiece. "She triggered a system wipe. You have to get out." Eden turned toward the screens, her expression unreadable. "It's too late. The legacy ends tonight." But before she could activate the final command, Mira grabbed her wrist. "No, we end it. Together." Their eyes locked, 2 daughters, 1 fate, and for the first time in 20 years, they both hesitated.